Welcome to our Chatting with Charlie. We're talking about the July Visa Bulletin.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
All right, Charlie, we see some movement. We're excited to talk about that. But let's first talk about our family-based. So what's going on in our family-based cases?
Well, it was very pleasant surprise and movement in virtually all of the family categories, especially the F2A category, where it moved all the way to September of 2022. So from January to September, that's amazing. They also advanced the Chart B application filing date for the F2A category, which would seem to indicate that they believe the F2A rest of world date will be continuing to move forward at a steady pace, but we'll just have to wait and see if that happens. But again, F1, F2B, and F3 had very nice movements as well. The family fourth, the brothers and sisters of U.S. citizens, continues to hold.
Nice. All right. And then let's talk about our rest of world or all chargeability and what's the movement looking like there.
Yeah, we had a nice movement in the rest of world third preference date. Went from February 8th to April 1st. That's very nice. And hopefully we'll see a continued movement in that category. And we'll just have to wait to see there as well.
Okay, but then we didn't see any movement in EB2. So you think it'll move?
I was a little bit surprised to see that the third moved. So I was
Okay.
not surprised that they had held the second preference. As I think I've mentioned before, in these categories where they have a final action date listed, that means they have plenty of demand. So they really are in no rush, really, to move the date. They could have waited for July and moved it again in August when they had a better picture of what had happened for the month of June. They had no visibility into how many numbers had been used overseas in May because they made the determination of the July dates on June 2nd or 3rd. So therefore, none of the overseas posts would have submitted returns of the blocks of numbers they got. So anyway, it's nice, and we'll just have to see if it happens to move forward again.
Okay, and then let's talk about China. We got some movement. So we have some movement in EB1, and then we also saw movement in EB2 and EB3. So you want to talk about that?
Yeah, this was the greatest surprise to me, and it's
Yeah.
very nice. It's minimal movement in the employment first preference, but any movement is good movement.
Yeah.
And again, in the second and third, they had movement, which is nice. Again, a little surprising because they had no visibility into what the movement for June would have been. So, to go ahead and move it for July without knowing, okay, were their predictions for June number use accurate or not, when they didn't have to, they could have waited till August or September. Again, it's a little bit of a risky situation unless their previous estimates were extremely low, that they missed on their earlier estimates of how many numbers were going to be used based on movements.
So you're saying this because of how early the Visa Bulletin came out?
Yeah, they on the second of the month, what I would do typically from January bulletin on, I would typically wait until about the 8th or 9th of each month, depending on how the weekend fell with the date. Because I always liked, by that time, I would have a full week of seeing what the USCIS demand was based on my movement. So I would have, if I had waited till the 9th of June, I could have seen, okay, the China second preference date moved to December 1st for June. Is that generating the amount of demand I kind of expected? And then I would also have known how many numbers had been returned unused from the overseas post, because the overseas post receive blocks of numbers each month. So the block of numbers they received for interviews that were going to occur during the month of May, they are not required to return any of those unused numbers, and they only need to do so within 7 business days of the close of May. So by establishing the July dates on June 2nd or 3rd, they had no idea if their estimates of May number use were going to be accurate. And again, they wouldn't have seen if, the incoming demand by USCIS during that first week of June was what they kind of anticipated. So again, the fact that they've moved the dates or established the dates on either the second or third of the month for 8 out of the 10 months of this fiscal year, I think it's a little bit unnecessary.
Well, I guess we'll just have to wait and see because if they moved it now and they really shouldn't have, then we'll probably see some retrogression later. But we'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah, that's my one concern, not waiting and seeing if what you've done is accurate and get some kind of idea. And again, as I keep repeating myself, they have plenty of demand. They could have notified the immigration service that, okay, here's where we think that the dates might be by September. USCIS would have prepped all those cases. They could have waited till September to move the dates and still reached all the annual limits. So I may have held off for the July date at least.
But we'll just have to wait and see. Okay, let's move to India. So India, no movement, only in EB3, and we saw it, move forward by less than a week.
Yeah.
So any thoughts there?
No, this is kind of expected. They didn't do anything for June, so a 1 week movement for July, that's kind of acceptable.
Okay. And then let's walk through your predictions for movement in the coming months.
Yeah, these movements are an average for the whole entire fiscal year, October through September. I think these estimates have proven pretty accurate, if not a little bit conservative. And when I started doing these in the beginning of the year, I mentioned that I would always prefer to be a little conservative in the estimated movements so that nobody makes plans that they shouldn't do. And then they can always be pleasantly surprised. For example, if the second preference date moves 3 weeks or 4 weeks instead of the estimated two average.
Okay. Well, we'll just have to wait and see what happens in our August Visa Bulletin.
Yeah, I think one good thing that I would point out is there were no extra notes in the July Visa Bulletin advising people to be concerned with retrogressions for the month of August. If there was any concern on visa availability, they should have alerted the readers at that time. So that's an optimistic thing that no notes were put in the bulletin.
And then just a question, because I've been seeing this question is, how will all of this, the Visa Bulletin, be impacted by the travel bans?
The travel ban, the countries that are affected by the travel ban are very minor in terms of number use. So I would not expect the current travel ban to have really any impact on number use, especially in the employment category, where the USCIS uses probably, if you remove the EB5 category from employment, USCIS probably uses 90% of the numbers. So
Okay.
the 10%, even as much as 15% that may be processed overseas, there, that's a drop in the bucket in terms of the travel ban. And again, the affected travel ban countries are not heavy visa number users.
Okay. Well, this is an early broadcast for us. Usually the Visa Bulletin is like coming out now. So we'll just have to wait and see. So stay tuned and we'll see you next month.
Yep.
Thank you, Charlie.
Okay.